Hello fellows, Herogon here. June 2024 provided another whirlwind of both ease and obstacle. On June 15th, my on-the-job training at a local thrift store has ended. So now I'm back to square one of finding a part-time job. You might think it's crazy, but with game developers taking much more time to, develop, I believe having a typical part-time job should help. If I take a long time with game development, other factors such as gameplay and art direction could make my journey take a while. In other news, my dad's birthday was this past time on June 30th. Me and my siblings had some good times with my dad as he continues pushing closer to the 45 mark. We had some good pizza in Fort Lauderdale on Saturday, and back at home, my dad and my siblings watched Poltergeist 2. On his birthday, he spent the morning sleeping in, while in the evening, me and my dad joined a game of Ticket to Ride with my grandma and one of my brothers. Overall, not a bad month to start and end on. With that said, let's jump into the Funlog. June 2nd saw a minor update to the news pop-up widget. Most of the improvements involved adding some logic to allow for keyboard support to turn off our menu, preparing for future widget movement by adding similar functions for button selection, and adding a confirm selection function that calls our news pop-up to close. Otherwise known as patch notes, these small changes made are preparations for UI movement, like the other widgets for news pop-up. We have added a new close button to close our news pop-up menu, serving as another way to do such thing. In event begin play, we call some new listen for input action nodes between our existing set news data and listen for input action return P1 node. Much of the logic is the same as other widgets, using functions such as move selection, display selection, and confirm selection. Move selection does have minor logic differences compared to most other counterparts like it in other widgets. The logic in move selection goes like this if the following is true. For the branch, max selections is greater than current P1 selection plus direction, and current P1 selection plus direction is greater than -1. From there, we set current P1 selection to the value of current P1 selection plus direction, getting those two values. We call move selection via a custom event, which we call back to in our listen for input action nodes. While much of this logic has been covered before, it's always good to ensure that all widgets or UI, no matter their use, have all of the basics that any UI or user interface or widgets, whatever you call it, have all of their stuff needed. June 9th saw Shawnthebro adding practice mode settings. For those intrigued, I recall that Tekken 7 had a separate menu for practice mode settings. You could change the CPU stance alongside many other options in that game. While this tutorial had a similar concept, we still have a long way to go to get to Tekken 7's levels, or at the very least the minimum of what Tekken 7 and other fighting games have offered. In base player controller.h, we have a new blueprint callable function, perform options input logic. In the .cpp file, perform options input logic has its input component set up using the bind action area. Perform options input logic uses many if statements to check if our game mode and game instance are set up correctly alongside the match state not being default. After that, we then check if our game mode type is practice. If so, we call a function known as open practice settings. Open practice settings is a blueprint implementable event that uses the base player controller as an input. For new blueprints, we create a practice settings row. This will be used in another new widget, practice settings. In practice settings row, we only use the following for visuals alone: a button, an image, and 2 text spots. In the practice settings widget, we use a vertical box to put 5 practice settings row widgets inside of it. Finally, in default game mode BP, we call open practice settings as an event, which will use nodes to create our practice settings widget and add it to the viewport. Much of the work has been cosmetic or visual so far, but later tutorials should flesh out the practice settings UI. June 16th gave a new topic to cover from Shawnthebro: tag teams. If you have played Marvel vs. Capcom, you know the mechanics of choosing 2 or 3 characters as part of a team very well. While Sean's attempt is still preliminary, the eventual effort will continue improving upwards. In base player controller.h, we create 2 new functions: call tagout and call release tagout. We call these in base player controller.cpp's sub input component area, and bind actions that call these 2 functions. Further down the .cpp file, we have call tagout and call release tagout's logic, both of which are similar to most input-based controller functions. We check if our possessed pawn variable is the one grabbing the logic. If so, our possessed pawn will call a function from the character.h file. In call tagout's case, the function from the character.h file is tagout. After writing the tagout function in character.h, our character.cpp is where we will fill out the logic. In the tagout function, we check if we have our base game instance before checking a new enum variable. In base game instance.h, we created this new enum class of team mode type, alongside a variable that gets our current team mode type. We set the team mode type to duo in base game instance.cpp, alongside some other variables that were never set within the .cpp file. Back in tagout, we fire a UE_log or UE log, whichever you prefer to call it, If the base game instance's team mode type does not equal the team mode type of solo, or in this case only one character. So far, this is the only way we'll know if the tag team function works. In the base character BP back in Blueprints, we only use an input action that will be for our player 2's inputs, like all other input actions for player 2 seen here. We use a validated get of player 2 reference before casting to our base player controller and calling call tag out on pressed and call release tag out on release. This was overall quite a lot, but it's still far from done. The next few times we improve our implementation of tag team functionality should be an intriguing journey. June 21st brought me to a fighting game framework side quest in the form of the Converting the 2.5D Fighter to 3D Fighter tutorial series from Shawnthebro. That tutorial involved adding front and back bounce to all arenas, altering the stages to fit the third-dimensional movement transition, and improving the 3D camera. Much of the improvements there were done in Blueprint, particularly the default camera. We have a custom event known as Use Camera. This sets up our camera edges, both inner and outer, for the left and right sides. Now, however, we are spawning 2 more camera edges for the front and back. This is to prevent our characters from falling off the stage when they sidestep, which can also be done by scaling the floor so it covers more space when it comes to worries about falling off the stage. In Use Camera, after all of our past logic is done, we have 2 more spawn actor nodes, which will spawn camera edges. We will set these to our new front outer edge and back outer edge variables respectively. The variable type of these 2 is the actor blueprint camera edge for the variables. After that, we have a new function called set 3D boundaries. In there, we will set 2 new variables, front max and back max. First, we need to get our player 1 reference variable, get actor location, and get the return value x by splitting the struct of get actor location. We add negative 700 to the x value and set front max. After setting our front max, we set actor transform by using a make vector, which will use all of our get actor location values and the earlier add node for the x value logic mentioned. After getting our target for set actor transform, much of what I've mentioned is repeated a second time, except that we get player 2 reference, add 700 to the x value of our get actor location node, and the target is back outer edge for the set actor transform node. The scale of our actor transform is also adjusted to account for anything within the set actor transform. So far, that series of grab bag topic tutorials every Friday has been interesting. Who knows where we might go next for making a Tekkenlike. For now, only a few might have an inkling of directions, but they will have to wait for next time. June 23rd was Sonic the Hedgehog's birthday and yet another day of Shawnthebro tutorials. After that 1 week break from that tutorial topic, we now went back to improving upon practice settings. We've added some navigation functionality to the practice settings widget, improved widget inputs while our game is paused, and minor updates to training mode. In our practice settings widget, we have given event begin play some new nodes to pause the game. We set game pause to true, and then set input mode game and UI using owning player as our player controller, and the practice settings vertical boxes children at index 0 as the widget to focus. We have also added our widget navigation interface made in code as an implemented interface. This way, we can reuse inputs like up or down across certain widgets just by using events alone. Currently, in practice settings, we only use move up and move down as events from the widget navigation interface. For these two interface events, we're using a function known as move selection, which is similar to the past ones we have used in other widgets. In move selection, we check if our current selection integer variable plus the direction is greater than -1, and the same addition logic is less than the children count of practice settings vertical box. If the logic is true, we set our current selection to be itself plus the direction before calling another function named determine selection. In determine selection, we use a for each loop that has the practice settings vertical box getting all children and plugging that into the input. In the loop body, we check if our array index does not equal the current selection variable. If so, we cast to practice settings row and change the setting borders brush image from that widget to none, so we indicate that we are no longer on that selection. If not, then the image for our setting border is set to indicate we are on that selection via an image. Now, when using the move selection node for event up and event down, you'll want to use a direction input value of 0 when on event begin play. For upward movement or event move up, -1. And for downward movement or event move down, +1. In the base character BP, we have a function called getMenuWidgets, which has an input of type userWidget class reference and an output type of type userWidget object reference. In that function, we plug the widget class ref input into the widget class input of getAllWidgets of class. We then use a branch to check if our foundWidgets array output from getAllWidgets of class is a valid index. If so, we go to a return node with the userWidget object reference output. We get a copy of our foundWidgets array from earlier and plug the output of that get array in. The output of our getMenuWidgets function will send a message to one of our widget navigation interface functions depending on the direction. Overall, that week of long stuff was quite the minor improvements that we made. Game development may not be easy for most, but it does bring its small smack roll of intrinsic or extrinsic rewards. June 30th now takes us back to the tag team topic for Shawnthebro's tutorials. This tutorial of the week involved preparations to spawn the tag team characters. While it's not the typical stuff you'd expect from a fighting game like Marvel vs. Capcom, this week was good for our next few toddler steps. The first spot to go to was the game mode.h, where we created 2 new array variables using our player character class as the type. These 2 variables are Team 1 characters and Team 2 characters, which are self-explanatory names. Another area where we made a minor adjustment was in the character.cpp logic. In Tick, we have added a new if statement in our if is stuck in enemy condition bracket. Now, after checking if our character is stuck within another character, we check if the variable is our other player. If so, we do all of the typical logic that has been in there before, besides the ignore player-to-player collision function. We keep that particular function only within the brackets of if is stuck in enemy. Back in our blueprints, the spawn player function in default game mode BP has seen quite some additions to ensure our tag team logic works. After we have set our possessed pawn, we add a unique array item from the Team 1 characters array to our Player 1 variable. We then switch on team mode type. If we're in duos, we determine our character class while getting our actor transform plus negative 200 on the y-axis as our transform input value for the character class determining function. Note that to add to the y-axis, we need to break our actor transform, then use the make transform while giving an add node input as the make transform's location y input. Then we add our character reference output from the determined character class function to another add unique node where we get our Team 1 character array as the array to add an item to. Similar logic is repeated a second time if we use trios, but now we add another negative 200 to the transform of the second determined character class function in trios. Much of the logic is the same with player 2's line of logic. However, that area instead uses some variable values meant for player 2. The array of Team 2 characters is used. Determined character class uses a player of index of 1. And the transform logic of adding on the Y location for tag team members is positive 200. While this was certainly a lot to explain, I'm looking forward to the next big improvement to tag teams. The first half of June saw me go through the ropes of handling my copy of the fighting game framework while balancing college and on-the-job training. Luckily, the latter half of June saw me slowing down as I finished my on-the-job training and college work for that month. The start of creating tag teams proved to be a nice surprise to the month of June, as tag teams does feel like a popular mechanic in fighting games. In the coming months, I look forward to seeing what we can do with tag teams thanks to Shawnthebro. The Tower of Trials may be tough with college, but I won't clock out just yet. Credit again goes to Shawnthebro for all his work, which I've enjoyed going through. It has been a lovely backbone for the Funlog content, and I hope I can succeed as he has when working with Unreal Engine. With all that said, I hope you like this video, so comment, like, and subscribe down below if you have not already. It helps a small YouTuber out, especially in times like these. I've been Herogon, and you've been you. Thank you for tuning in, and I will catch you all later.